They erased entire civilizations without firing a shot. They didn't conquer planets, they deleted them from existence. And then, they made one mistake. They provoked us. This isn't just another story about space battles. It's about what happens when one fragile, chaotic species dares to stand between the void and everything worth saving. So don't blink. Don't skip. What you're about to hear is humanity's most defiant moment. Before we begin, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, where human courage collides with alien empires. If you believe humanity is more than just survival, like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to hear what they don't want you to remember. Today's challenge: if you make it to the end, comment the code word, "We don't kneel," so we know you're part of the resistance. Now, let's begin. I didn't wake up that morning expecting to change the fate of the galaxy. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't a hero. I was just trying to survive another day. My ship was dying around me. Panels flickered like they were gasping for breath. The oxygen recycler gave one last rattling wheeze before it went silent. My hands trembled on the control panel, not from fear, but from the thin, biting cold of a cabin losing life support. Then, through static and fading sensors, a planet appeared, Velar. It didn't matter that it was dead. It didn't matter that the logs called it cursed. All I saw was land. And hope. The descent was rough. I crash-landed in a valley choked by silence. No wind. No life. The dust outside lay untouched like it had waited centuries for someone to disturb it. The sun hung low and pale, casting everything in a bluish gray that drained warmth from the landscape. And there it was. Half buried in sand stood something impossible, a black pyramid that seemed to drink the light around it. It wasn't made of stone. The surface shimmered like obsidian oil, and as I drew closer, the air got colder, thicker, like I was walking into a place that remembered pain. No lights. No doors. But when I stepped forward, the wall rippled. Not opened, ripples, like a pond disturbed by a single thought. And I stepped in. The hallway swallowed all sound. My own footsteps felt like an intrusion, echoing off walls covered in symbols that pulsed faintly, as if reacting to my presence. Not in warning, but recognition. I should have turned back. I should have felt fear. But fear had stopped visiting me a long time ago. The deeper I went, the more the silence felt alive, watching, weighing me, like a jury of the forgotten. Then I entered the heart of the pyramid. It wasn't a throne room. It wasn't a lab. It was a chamber of judgment. And in its center floated the armor. It shimmered like liquid steel, colors shifting between mirror silver and deep storm gray. It hovered inches above a platform that didn't look like it was built, but grown. Beneath it, light twisted and swirled in a slow spiral, like a pool of starlight trapped under glass. The armor wasn't just waiting. It was listening. I don't know what made me step forward. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fate. Or maybe it was the crushing silence that filled my chest whenever I thought about how small, how utterly irrelevant, I was out here. Forgotten. Alone. So I reached out. The air between my fingers and the armor crackled like frostbite on skin. But there was no pain. Only weight, ancient, heavy, undeniable. Then it moved. A tendril of metallic fluid reached out, slow and deliberate. It hovered an inch from my palm, steadying me like a living creature, and then it touched me. Not with violence, but with recognition. The armor didn't latch on like a parasite. It embraced me. It flowed over my skin in perfect silence, reshaping itself to my body. Cold, at first, but then warmth flooded into my bones. Not like heat, but like understanding. A word, without sound, pierced through my thoughts. Accepted. That moment broke something inside me. Not in a bad way, but in the way a dying man breaks into tears when he tastes clean water for the first time in days. I fell to my knees. I didn't cry because I was scared. I cried because, for the first time in a long time, I felt chosen. Not because I was strong. Not because I was worthy. But because I was human. I looked at my hands, encased in this strange second skin, and felt something change. My breath came easier. My heart steadied. My mind sharpened. And then I realized. This armor had turned away emperors. Had crushed warlords. It had waited for thousands of years. And it chose me. Not because I was powerful. But because I was just a man, broken and beaten, but still willing to stand. It wasn't power that made me worthy. It was the fact that I kept going. The armor didn't whisper victory into my ears. It didn't fill me with visions of power or glory. It just accepted me. And somehow, that quiet word meant more than 1,000 medals. But far away, across systems I'd never even heard of, others were listening. In a place they called the Senate of Worlds, where voices echoed through chambers larger than cities, an alarm that hadn't sounded for 6,000 years began to scream. Not with sound, but with energy, pure, ancient, coded pulses that lit up long-forgotten systems like fire in a tomb. At first, they didn't believe it. Some called it a malfunction. Others a cruel prank. Until the message became clear. The armor has chosen. And the chosen was human. The reaction was immediate. Some laughed, the kind of laughter you use to hide your dread. Impossible, they said. A species that still breathes oxygen? That still bleeds? But beneath the surface of mockery, fear festered. Because the armor didn't choose lightly. And it never chose wrong. The Senate broke into arguments. Empires accused each other of tampering. Some screamed for war. Others demanded silence, hoping if they ignored it long enough, it would just go away. But deep down, they all knew. The armor had made its choice. And me? Back on that cold, cracked world, I wasn't celebrating. I was sitting on a rock inside the pyramid, still trying to understand what had just happened. My hand trembled as I looked at the metal skin that now covered it. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't even a soldier. I was a man with broken dreams, a salvager scraping the edges of existence for spare parts and stale air. And yet the armor had bonded with me. Why? I remember staring at my reflection on one of the mirrored walls, half man, half myth, and asking myself, what did it see? I thought about the years I'd spent drifting. The jobs I'd failed. The people I'd let down. The version of myself that never quite fit anywhere. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the armor wasn't looking for perfection. Maybe it was looking for someone who had survived imperfection. Someone who had fallen and gotten up again over and over. Because that's what it means to be human. We don't grow through power. We grow through pain. We adapt. While the Senate debated, others were already moving. Shadow fleets, hidden orders, ancient cults that had waited generations to destroy anyone the armor chose. Their records were clear. If the armor activates, end the bearer before it spreads. And so, I became a target. It wasn't about me. It was about what I represented, proof that even the smallest spark could still ignite a fire. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a fleet. I didn't have allies. But I had something else. I had curiosity. I had doubt. I had that very human ache to understand what I wasn't supposed to. So I started asking the armor questions, not out loud, but in my mind. And it answered. Slowly. Carefully. Like a teacher watching a student take their first step. It didn't give me blueprints for weapons or strategies for war. Instead, it showed me stories. Images of people who once wore it. Warriors who didn't start as conquerors, but as defenders. Not of empires, but of lives. Of values. Of homes they loved. Their stories weren't about winning. They were about not giving up. And that's when I realized what the armor had truly done. It hadn't given me power. It had given me perspective. Across the stars, the fear grew louder. Because they didn't fear a weapon. They feared a human wearing it. We're unpredictable. We're stubborn. We're creative in the face of collapse. We turn metal scraps into miracles. We laugh in the dark and dare fate to try again. No one else in the galaxy fights like us, not because we're the strongest, but because we fight for something. For meaning. For freedom. For each other. And maybe that's why the armor chose me. Not because I was the best humanity had, but because I was a reminder that we're never truly broken unless we give up. If this is what they fear, then maybe it's time they finally understood what it means to be human. I learned the truth fast. The armor wasn't forged to protect a life. It was forged to protect a memory. A memory so ancient and so dangerous that even the stars seemed to dim around it. It held echoes of screams that came before time, of empires devoured in silence, of light smothered not by darkness, but by absence. The kind of absence that doesn't conquer you. It erases you. A force older than war itself had returned. The armor didn't shout. It didn't show me burning cities or crumbling thrones. It gave me a single moment, one vision, of a planet blinking out like a candle. Not destroyed. Forgotten. That's when I understood. This wasn't about battles. It wasn't about politics. This was a cosmic reset button being pressed, and we were the mistake to be wiped clean. I should have been terrified. And I was. But beneath the fear, there was fire. Not at the enemy, but at the galaxy. At its leaders who folded before the first blow was thrown. At the way they whispered behind closed doors, already dividing up the ashes of the worlds they hadn't even tried to save. All their knowledge. All their fleets. All their pride. And they gave up without bleeding. That's not us. That's not human. We fight. Even when we shouldn't. Even when we have no chance. And sometimes, especially when we have no chance. Because we don't just fight to win. We fight for meaning. For the people we love. For the stories that deserve to be told. For memories that can't be measured by data or diplomacy. For songs passed down from mother to child. For the smell of bread in a home that no longer exists. The armor showed me that, too. Not through words, but through sensations, holographic fragments from its past bearers. One died holding a line no one asked him to hold. Another fell on a nameless moon saving civilians that other species had labeled acceptable losses. And one chose not to strike, even when he could have ended the war, because the cost was too human. They weren't remembered as heroes. They weren't remembered at all. But the armor remembered. And now, so did I. As I stood inside my ship, the panels around me flickering with alien code, the armor sinking to every system with silent elegance, I didn't feel powerful. I felt angry. Not out of hatred. But because the galaxy had forgotten the value of resistance. And because they believed, truly believed, that surrender was wisdom. But wisdom without courage is just surrender dressed up in nice words. And humans? We're not wise. Not always. We make mistakes. We lose control. We feel too much, too fast, too deep. But that's our weapon. Our greatest weapon. We don't hide from emotion. We channel it. We use love and grief and anger and awe as fuel to build rockets, write poems, risk everything for strangers, and still find the strength to forgive. Even when it hurts. The enemy wouldn't understand that. It didn't need to. It would underestimate it. And that's why we'd win. I rerouted energy through the ship manually, even though the armor could have done it. I needed to feel it, needed to touch the heat of the core with my own fingers. I wasn't a passenger in this war. I was a soldier now. Not because of training, but because of choice. The armor wanted to act. It pulsed through my nerves, ready to fire, ready to run. But I held it back. Because I had a different idea. Not to attack. Not yet. But to broadcast. Not a challenge. Not a threat. A story. Using old Earth frequencies layered beneath alien signal bands, I sent a transmission. It was me, no title, no edits, no grand declarations. Just a human face. And I told the truth. I told the galaxy about what I saw. What I felt. How it wasn't strength or speed that made us dangerous. It was our ability to hold the line even when we knew we'd die. Our need to leave something better behind. Our refusal to be edited out of existence. Some will laugh. Some will panic. Some will come for me. But others will remember who they were before they got comfortable. And maybe, just maybe, they'll fight too. Not for survival, but for significance. Because this war isn't about who's strongest. It's about who refuses to be forgotten. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's making noise in a quiet universe. And we're just getting started. Trinaxis was a world without breath. A place that no longer rotated. Time itself seemed to have stopped spinning here. The stars above were still, as if watching in respectful silence. The armor brought me here. I didn't fly the ship, it flew me. Not with force, but with instinct. It guided me, like an old soldier returning to the place where everything ended. The surface was littered with ruin. Craters deep enough to swallow cities. Towers once taller than mountains now collapsed like sandcastles against the tide. Massive bones, some fossilized, some perfectly preserved, lay among twisted metal and scorched stone. They weren't just alien. Some were armored. Some still gripped broken weapons. The wind carried no sound, but the silence was heavy. Not empty, though full. Full of memory. I stepped onto the ash-covered ground, every footstep stirring ancient dust. The air was thin, but I could still smell something metallic, something old. It clung to my lungs like grief. Then the whispers started. They weren't voices. More like echoes pulled from the walls, from the armor itself. Flashbacks. Visions. A dozen warriors, faces I didn't recognize, standing on the cliffs of Trinaxis, back straight, arms raised, not in surrender, but in refusal. A promise etched into their bones. They fought here. And they died here. And I could feel every moment of it in the pulse of the armor. This wasn't just a battlefield. It was a tomb. And I was walking through the heart of it. In the center of the planet's largest crater stood what was left of the stronghold, black spires, half melted from plasma, riddled with energy scars. They had once been temples. Places of strategy and silence. Now, they leaned like broken teeth beneath a dead sky. I entered one without hesitation. Not because I was brave, but because something inside me had already been here. The armor synced with the walls. Symbols lit up along the corridors, dim blue veins pulsing like a dying heartbeat. My mind filled with fragments, diagrams, battle simulations, genetic memories. That's when I saw the truth. I wasn't chosen randomly. The armor wasn't just searching for a match. It was searching for a memory carried in blood. And mine. My blood held the last echo of the ones who built it. I was the final descendant of the ancients. Not by glory. Not by prophecy. Just by survival. A quiet lineage, hidden through the collapse of empires and the dust of generations. I didn't feel special. I felt small. But the armor didn't need a legend. It needed someone stubborn enough to keep going. Just as I began to process it, the sky outside darkened. Not from storm. From ships. 3 of them. Long, jagged, black as deep space. No lights. No signatures. Predator ships. Designed not to conquer, but to erase evidence. They didn't hail. Didn't announce their intentions. They weren't coming to parley. They came to kill. The armor flared across my skin, sensing danger before my own nerves could. It didn't feed me adrenaline. It fed me clarity. Time slowed. My thoughts didn't race, they refined. Patterns snapped into place. I saw the angles of approach, the energy fluctuations in their weapons, the timing between their scans. I was unarmed. But I wasn't helpless. I ran. Not away. Into the ruins. I moved through the collapsed halls like a ghost through memory. Every step kicked up ash and sparks. My mind worked faster than it ever had. Every broken beam became cover. Every shattered corridor became a trap. Let them follow. Let them think I was running blind. I funneled them through the remnants of the temple's defense grid, reactivated just long enough to trigger false signals. Their AI stumbled, recalibrating. That gave me seconds. And seconds were enough. With the armor's help, I rerouted ancient power lines into the floor, turning the temple into a pressure cooker of unstable energy. When they entered the main atrium, the armor pulsed. I dropped a shard of my own armor into the power core. It exploded, not outward, but inward, imploding the entire central chamber. I stood shielded in an energy pocket, watching as the hunters were swallowed in a dome of silent, crushing force. When it cleared, I walked out. One ship downed. 2 retreating. The sky clear again. But my heart wasn't. Because I knew something now. This wasn't a war of armies. It was a war of memory. Of refusal. They wanted to destroy the armor because it remembered what they wanted forgotten. They feared me not because I was strong, but because I carried that memory forward. That resistance. That old, dangerous idea that some things are still worth dying for. And when you hold that belief, not in your hands, but in your blood, you don't run. You stand. And you fight. They didn't send scouts this time. They sent executioners. 3 warships tore through Trinaxis orbit like blades across old parchment, dark, silent, too precise to be anything but assassins. No warning. No diplomacy. Just the cold certainty of annihilation. I didn't run. Not because I was fearless. But because something inside me, something old and newly awakened, refused. The armor didn't hum like a machine. It breathed with me. It didn't pull up targeting systems or lock onto threats. Instead, it fed me patterns. Geometry in motion. Probability wrapped in instinct. The battlefield unfolded like a game of chess with no board, no turns, only consequences. I saw their movements before they made them. The smallest tremble in their forward thrusters revealed intent. The microsecond delay between weapon charges hinted at overconfidence. They had fought others like me before. But they had never fought a human in this armor. The first ship opened fire, confident in the supremacy of its particle lances. The sky lit up, white, blue, electric. I didn't block. I redirected. I dove low, skimming the ground as the armor manipulated local magnetic fields, bending beams into a spiral that curved back toward their own cruiser. The impact was almost poetic, like watching a man trip on his own sword. It exploded mid-roll. No glory. Just metal, ash, and silence. The second ship broke formation, trying to flank. Smart. But not fast enough. Trinaxis had low gravity, but scattered with the remnants of orbital debris, shattered satellites, broken wings of ancient fighters, armor plates from wars long lost. I pulled them in. The armor extended invisible limbs of force, gathering the wreckage around me like a storm. I became the eye of a hurricane made of history. Then I launched. I hurled pieces like spears, jagged, unpredictable. Not meant to pierce shields, but to overwhelm AI logic. To confuse. To exploit the one thing computers struggle with. Chaos. They blinked. And I was inside their defenses. I didn't destroy them with guns. I ripped open their stabilizer core with a targeted EMP, amplified through the armor's own nervous system. The ship spun wildly before crashing into the side of a ruined orbital ring, blooming into fire. The third ship hesitated. And in that hesitation, I saw fear. Not human fear. Algorithmic. Cold. measurable, but still fear. They scanned me now. Not as a threat, but as an anomaly. They expected strength. They expected speed. But I was using neither. I was using audacity. I was using every trick human beings had ever used when the odds were impossible: deception, misdirection, timing, courage that verged on recklessness. And something more. Something they hadn't accounted for. Responsibility. Because as I hovered above Trinaxis, breathing hard, surrounded by fading heat signatures and drifting wreckage, I didn't feel proud. I felt heavy. These weren't the final bosses. They were the prologue. Someone, somewhere, had seen this battle. They would now rewrite their strategies. Build better ships. Train smarter pilots. They'd come harder next time. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. This was about declaring existence. I sent no victory signal. No triumph call. Instead, I walked to the edge of the cliff that overlooked what used to be the Great Canyon of Trinaxis. The armor peeled back slightly, letting me feel the raw wind, thin, bitter, and filled with the taste of iron dust. I stood there, silent, and watched the sky shift back to stillness. And then, it spoke. Not with words. With emotion. A pulsing empathy. As if the armor, once forged to fight an ancient threat, had remembered what it meant to feel loss. It had chosen me, not because I was unbeatable, but because I understood what must be protected. We don't fight because we can. We fight because someone must. And if that someone is just one person, one broken man in a second-hand ship, stumbling into destiny, then so be it. Let the enemy send more. Let them build faster, stronger, deadlier machines. But no matter how sharp their claws are, they will never understand why we fight. And that will always be their weakness. The visions didn't stop. Even with my eyes open, I saw them, projected not just into my mind, but through it. Carved into memory like old scars you don't remember earning. Massive beings wading through nebulae, their limbs blotting out stars. A moon split open like fruit, its core spilling molten life into the void. Screaming fleets locked in slow-motion annihilation, ships tearing themselves apart, not from damage, but from within, as if something inside them had gone mad. And then, Earth. Not the abstract globe I'd seen on space charts, but home. The blue oceans turned black. Skies filled with ash. Cities I remembered as flickering childhood dreams, New York, Nairobi, Kyoto, glowing with unnatural fire. Forests turned to dust. Rivers running thick with debris. It wasn't just the image. It was the feeling. That moment when the last person you love is about to disappear, and you can do nothing but scream without sound. The armor had tried to protect me from that. But now, it showed me everything. And in that instant, I understood. This wasn't about me. It wasn't even about the galaxy. This was about home. I collapsed to my knees on the deck of the ship. Not from pain. From memory. Because when you've drifted far enough from Earth, when you've spent years among the stars, you begin to forget the little things. The steam rising from a bowl of soup. The sharp smell of concrete after rain. The sound of laughter in a room where no one is trying to impress anyone. My mother's humming in the kitchen. The flicker of candlelight during blackout nights. The neighbor who always watered her garden at dawn like it was sacred. These aren't in textbooks. You can't encode them in data packets. But they are what make us worth saving. And the armor, this ancient, logical, impenetrable thing, felt it too. Because something shifted. It stopped leading. And it started listening. Its energy patterns adjusted, not just to optimize protection or offense, but to match emotion. To reflect intention. My steps became lighter. My thoughts clearer. Not because I was stronger, but because I had remembered why I was here. The enemy thinks in totality. It sees existence as resource and threat. It moves to extinguish what it cannot use. But we humans, don't follow such linear logic. We sacrifice for dreams. We bleed for stories. We believe that hope is worth dying for, even if no one else does. That's what they will never understand. They think power is mass, energy, numbers. But for us, power is memory. It's the echo of a song sung around a campfire 400 years ago that still makes us cry. It's a name etched on a wall. A letter buried in a drawer. A child looking at the stars, whispering, "One day, I'll go there." The armor fed me another vision, not from its past. From my future. I saw myself in battle, yes, but not as a destroyer. As a bridge. Others followed. Aliens. Humans. Beings I didn't recognize but felt drawn to, standing side by side, not because they agreed on everything, but because they refused to vanish without fighting for what mattered. We weren't the biggest. We weren't the fastest. But we were the most determined. Because we carried something into battle that no superweapon could match. A sense of why. I stood up again, my armor glowing softly with pulses of gold and deep blue. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Alive. With me. Not over me. It had adapted, not just to my body, but to my beliefs. And I realized something beautiful. This armor had survived wars that shattered time. But in all those centuries, it had never learned what I had just taught it. That people, not machines, win wars. That spirit, not circuitry, turns the tide. So let the enemy come. Let it rain fire and silence. Let it try to erase us one by one. Because it will find something it cannot code, cannot model, cannot calculate. A boy from Earth. Wearing memory. Fighting for soup and songs and stories and stupid, messy, brilliant love. The armor was no longer my shield. It had become my voice. And I would use it to remind the stars what it means to be human. They didn't arrive in waves this time. They descended, like a sentence passed down by gods who thought themselves above consequence. Colossal ships, their surfaces pulsing with void energy, no lights, no insignias, just presence. Like someone had carved black holes into the fabric of space and wrapped them in armor. They moved slowly, deliberately, not out of caution, but confidence. Predators with nothing left to prove. The skies above Earth turned the color of bruised steel. The stars disappeared. The sun blinked behind the shadow of their arrival. And still, we stood. I stood. The armor vibrated against my skin, its texture tighter now, less like a suit, more like a second layer of will. It didn't hum. It listened. It knew this wasn't just a battle. It was a reckoning. They expected the usual. Scrambling defenses. Static-laced comms. Half-coordinated evacuation orders. Fear-fracturing unity before the first shot was fired. But what they got was us. A species they didn't understand. A species that never evolved to conquer stars, but to defy extinction. We struck back before they even finished forming position. They scanned for military bases. Instead, they found reprogrammed mining rigs, launched like spears from asteroid belts. They targeted satellites. Instead, they triggered virus bombs coded by schoolchildren, uploaded in bursts of pulse-lag data writing obsolete Earth radio frequencies. They expected disciplined armies. They got veterans with spinal implants, flying rust bucket fighters stitched together from 6 wars, powered by faith and caffeine. And through it all, the armor amplified my reach, not just physically, but strategically. I wasn't just a combatant. I was the signal. The armor linked me to every human node in the solar system, whispers from Martian coders, heartbeat telemetry from lunar gunners, even kinetic readings from deep-sea mech pods on Earth's drowned coasts. I moved through it all, not giving orders, but amplifying intention. It was beautiful. Not organized. Not clean. But alive. The chaos of humanity at full tilt. Disobedient. Passionate. Flawed, but utterly relentless. I remember one moment, mid-battle, when a destroyer broke through and aimed for a hospital dome on Europa. There were no warships in range. No intercept systems. Just me. I could hear the screams through the relay. Not in terror, but in defiance. Nurses barricading doors with gurneys. Doctors shielding children with their own bodies. Civilians sending last messages, not of fear, but faith. I dropped everything. The armor responded like lightning, bending local space, hurling my ship forward in a blur of compression and light. I collided with the destroyer mid-strike, no weapons. Just will. The explosion tore the sky apart. When I awoke, half the armor was gone. But the hospital was still standing. And that was all that mattered. This was what they didn't expect. Not strategy. Not strength. But solidarity. Humans who argued over water rights last month, now sharing oxygen tanks. Hackers who'd once warred over currency now swapping code mid-battle. We didn't kneel. We rose. Together. And somewhere in that storm, the enemy hesitated. For just 1 second, their perfect calculations didn't know what to do. Because you can't model chaos born of conviction. You can't predict a species that sings while burning. That builds new homes from rubble before the dust settles. That sees destruction and still chooses hope. Epilogue, a new flame. I don't know how long this fight will last. Maybe it ends tomorrow. Maybe it burns across 10,000 years. But when the stars speak of this war, they won't remember which fleet had more guns, or who broke which treaty. They'll remember the day something small refused to die quietly. They'll remember that a fragile, foolish, emotional, inconsistent, chaotic species looked into the dark and said, "No more." And then made it true. The armor didn't win this war. We did. With stubbornness. With sacrifice. With the echo of lullabies sung by parents under broken roofs. With the idea that even if we fall facing forward. So if you're hearing this, if you're standing at the edge of something too big, too cruel, too final, remember this. The future isn't written in stars. It's written in us. And humanity? We choose to fight. And that's how one human, one ordinary soul in extraordinary armor, stood between annihilation and everything we love. Not with overwhelming power, but with purpose. Not with armies, but with the memory of rain, of laughter, of home. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think humanity's greatest strength is our chaos? Or our unity? What would you fight for if the stars turned against us? Tell us in the comments. And if you haven't yet, like this video, subscribe to HFY Sci-Fi Love and War Story, and share this story with someone who still believes in defiance. And if you made it to the end, type "We don't kneel" in the comments, so we know you're one of us. Because this isn't the end. This is only the beginning. Stay ready. More stories are coming.